Yeah, I want to include, I'd included a little earlier, and I was kind of like thinking about the deal about Sarah and the alphanumerics and linguistics and practical application of integration and compatibility and analytical and all that stuff. And it seems that some of the information has gotten to, something about in my mind. It seems to be like, the Chuck Woolery thing, the two and two thing, and the flip side of, how the P, normally when it's visible, followed by S in chronological order from left to right. Sometimes when it's viewed and seen, it's pronounced, and actually it's normally not when the S is involved. But when it's flipped and the S is in front of the P before, from left to right, SP, it's normally the P is pronounced. I mean, normally like every single time. And the thing with this, it seems to be the deal about Sprite that way. I like the Sprite in you, and the thing about the Sprite being, having the sight would normally be even, of accuracy and clarity and focus. Likewise, even perfect 10-10 vision of accuracy of, like a pilot would, be the word of affirmation of a pilot of that in that way, normally of accuracy involving that fact about it. But anyway, so it seemed to be like something about the deal of how the P and the R, and it seems to be like the connectivity between Sprite and the sight and the write, and what a write to write to a symbol, in the way it seems to be ultimately getting to repeatedly, through like a lot of studying and looking at factors of um, Geneva, Switzerland, and what human capital and human civil rights is in that way. And ultimately, Zildjian's symbol, having a right to a symbol, yeah. Zildjian's symbol, predominantly a Switzerland made um, symbol of percussion and drummers, right? In any case, so that's automatically a thought on my mind automatically about the alphanumerics of calculus and 92 and Pentagon and a drummer and all the connectivity and with what I've referred to on my channel, youtube.com channel, Wade ASV PRIDDY. That's Wade ASV Pretty and Wade ASV Pretty PRIDDY 192. Okay, in any case, yeah, so like I was thinking about that with Sarah and Jude as compared to Judah. Some of the information I've been seeing, obviously it became noticeable, not long ago. It's not the first time, but seemingly now it seems to be the deal about Australia, which has been predominantly everything that I've ever known and seen as far as like available information. Australia being to the lower African side, and now what's showing is Australia to the upper right towards the India side, and everything seems to be about a nativity point of origin or American history involving Native American Indian might be the only factor of nativity representative of what a negative thing would be as compared to a positive in that way, or what management really is in that way as a contributive factor of what integration means that way, even in a way of like even a pastel, the history of the television screen, in between like black and white and monochrome, and with the pastel colors, all Technicolor is pastel colors. And my thing about the history of the television screen being black and white, like it's like almost biblical of the third and fourth generation. That way of the history of the television screen, and it seemed to be the significance of like Wyatt Earp, and what Wyatt Earp is to, the Lord's Supper for real, and the way of Earp, the exclusionary rule provision and executive powers and sovereign immunities and governmental amnesties, and all that stuff ultimately gets to some high silver deal, beyond what would be normally identified as a color code even of a toilet normally being white. And if the only thing about it being a stainless steel in a governmental venue would only represent the high silver, or what that is to identifying, one of the oldest computer mainframes identified as the Whopper, or what Henry VIII is to, the Whopper and the Kingsmanship and Burger King that way, and, what an onion ring is. And, there's certain factors involving Henry VIII and, the trench around a castle, which in my memory, I'm going to have to actually make sure I know what I'm talking about and remember accuracy, or if it's some like medieval periodic era that way. But anyway, it seemed to be like the deal about a moot. I think that's what it is referring to, around a castle. Likewise, yet the word in pronunciation, I'm not sure if the spelling is the same or different, but like practicing law in a courtroom itself of universities, that word moot is like MOOT. Okay, and that's like 63, like an applied and all that stuff about 63 in the way of what many factors of applied means that way. But practice makes perfect in the way of like that. Likewise, it seems to be the deal about Henry VIII and some idea of like the Thanksgiving, or beyond the front lines of the beachfront of what that normally suggests, involving the Mayflower and Christopher Columbus. It almost gives a representation of a 90-degree right angle of South America and Colombia that way. Yet of England, and maybe just the language itself, because sometimes legal terminology in Latin America is referred to as south of the equator of Latin terminology is referred to as Latin. Yet based upon pronunciation, Gio was hoping for longine, or is it short, like a little U over a vowel, or is it long? It seemed to be like the deal of like Latin or latent, in visualization, even trans superimposiums. Latent is like almost the reference of invisible, biblically almost like unseen, as unseen God, or unseen or invisible or transparent. That way is really what it ultimately gets to, in that way of like a transition, like a superimposium would give the impression of a transition, like of a pastel, or the history of the television screen, or what the deal is about the transition using Technicolor that way, or what pastel is to 73 Harris in Egypt, or it seems to be ultimately getting to the UL listed thing about the pronunciation of like UL being Yule, or the Yule Brenner, and the thing about the Moses and Pharaoh, and Yule Brenner being the Pharaoh deal, and Charlton Heston being the Moses deal, and all that stuff about 71 and Moses and Pearland, and all that stuff about so get smart, get Maxwell smart, and the thing with this is that RPM is like a manufacturer on Highway 288 south of Houston. And it's kind of like RPM is like the automatic 800 RPM as an idle set for like any four-wheel vehicle. I think every, if I'm not mistaken, every four-wheel form of transportation, a vehicle, is like an idle at 800 RPM, like an American Idol. Not, or my thought, even maybe what normally and even heard of sometimes in religion as a pagan idolatry, or some connectivity of an American Idol as a pagan idolatry, or even the deal about the Ten Commandments and Pharaoh that way of Egypt, the blackbird, or the Deep Star Six thing. And I'm trying to actually think about some connectivity between Abraham Lincoln and the night vision that way, ultimately getting to to think about the Huddlemart of Lincoln Continental, and what the Continental is to the computer platform, the architecture platform embedded in encryption. And I'm like really like thinking about that kernel, because when Abraham seems to be likewise of Abraham Lincoln of night vision, yet with Sarah, biblically, Abraham and Joseph being of Sarah, known as like the most beautiful woman like in the entire Bible. The thing with it is that the connectivity there, and pronunciation of Abraham Lincoln, and the 22 and 22 thing of Abraham seems to be like the FDIC and RCA, the 22 thing, and it's not really limited to that. But I mean, if there's like a degree level, and if the equator and operator is the only difference of like what only opportunity means between the degreed or non-degreed factor, or some kernel that might represent a partition, like division that way, and I'm really complete. I'm not even depending on information right now because of what I'm seeing involving, like Australia itself, everything I've ever known. As far as Australia being to the lower on the Africa side, now I've been seeing Australia to the upper right northeast side of like India, and right, maybe like Texas and an American thing is like automatically like American history. And the thing about the American Indian, that way, or what a reservation might only mean to a reserve, or management in a way that might not be seen normally as a contributing factor, or even a grant and that it's given, and that based upon that, even a practical application of like a, what that is in education, of like a Pell Grant, or a grant that would even suggest that forbearance is like a pass-fail and integrating factor of a transparent practical application of forbearance. Is normally even practical application of supplemental security income of annuity, yet earned, but a benefit in the way of what forbearance represents as both of a student loan, yet it's of a grant. I mean, it's kind of like almost like the deal why a patent is not a copyright, or why Bitcoin is not cryptocurrency, or why the Fifth Amendment is not a nonprofit organization, and the list goes on and on about the 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 deal about it. And the thing with this is that it seems to be a factor right now that I'm thinking about involving what seems to be like the EA Sports, or the information. Me being a drummer and my entire life, the Tribe of Judah's like always been like the only information I've been had as available is like the Tribe of Judah being like all about musicians. Well, now I'm seeing it like as a Tribe of Levi. It's kind of like, you got to be kidding me. But the thing with this is, it seems to be like the deal about the equator and the one and only latitude at a 90 degree, which seems to be the deal about the hood ornament in Abraham Lincoln, of the pi r square thing about symmetrical asymmetrical value of a square of the formula itself, like the formative computation of a pi r squared, and the pronunciation of squared itself, and a symmetrical thing about it being instead of added twice, maybe just the simple square being divided, in retrospective, like intelligence and opposite, or Pentagon Reserve reverse, or the drummer thing, or what it really, symmetrical asymmetrical, the way it really is in that way. And it seems to be like the 90 degree of the hood ornament of Abraham Lincoln being the thing about the even the syllable of like Abraham being the deal about Abraham Lincoln, and Abraham of Sarah biblically, normally given reference that way of even Joseph. And the thing about it is I mentioned it, and it's either I'm pretty sure it's 177 Chase Practicum, and Chase Practicum Joseph, Abraham and Joseph, and what Chase Practicum is to the alphanumerics of like a telepathic power, or mental telepathy, or distinguish the difference between the thing about it, and the alphanumerics of Chase Practicum Joseph being the alphanumerics of 213, or the area code of Los Angeles, or Galveston County, or the Chevrolet Silverado deal about the alphanumerics of Chevrolet being 108, the operator of the zero thing, or the division and separation between church and state, that ultimately gets to once again the deal about the operator being 0 and 64, and HTTP of colon double forward slash, and Austin Powers Blue Bonnet Imperial Eagle that way. And the thing with this is that it seems to be getting to the EA test of the the eagle. The Austin Powers, Austin being 84, and embassy and all that stuff about the alphanumerics of 84. Likewise, in addition, being the I-35 thing of the capital, and what human capital is as compared to when it might be the only time if participation is a demanded requirement, or what intellectual and only a claim might represent, whether it's a known or not known fact. And if that's the only distinguishable difference of whether a known or not known fact of a claim, whether ownership is only maybe a thought of maybe a transaction, a daily transaction at the bank, in the form of a release of obligation, and thoroughly thought of whether or not if the thought of a defector seeking amnesty would only be the accusation of leaving the name that actually earned a U.S. dollar, or segregating maybe an international prejudice of attaching geographically the money in the form of a dollar, and maybe exclude, or the accusation of excluding even the euro dollar, or monies around the world of like international banking systems. I mean, if international law is the international law of what intellectual means of royalties, I mean, would it be a demeaning value of knowing or not knowing? Or maybe it's such a known fact that maybe an experience going through the circuit would be like, everything that seems to be like, whether or not if attaching citizenship and birthrights would maybe be an accusation of international prejudice, maybe even identifying like the U.S. dollar. Well, anyway, it's kind of like when I was going through this, like that's what I was like really looking at, is the backside of the U.S. $1 bill. In Washington D.C. being to the lower right on the front side, And, then God we trust above it all on the backside, and the competence and all that symbolic representation between the CPTIS, PTIS being 64, and all American and Israel, and quite a bit about the movie, and what the movie is to like deposition as compared to the television of like live on air, like legal media that way, not necessarily a deposition, would be almost like Univision on West Loop 610 right at Highway 59, Cuddy Corner, and from to a southeastern direction on the inside of the loop as compared to Univision on the outside to a northwestern at a diagonal, type of situation, which seems to be ultimately involving, four pastels. And it seems to be the deal about Univision at the same time of having four pastels. And I think the deal was the black and white deal, like Remo black dot drumhead, and like now the Aquarian white, the white power dot of the drumhead. I don't mean to sound like a promiscuous tambourine, with a cover charge or antisocial drumhead, but it seems to be, like it sometimes, think about the Ringo Starr thing about the Hey Jude, and what Hey Jude is to HA, and higher angels are like Sahara as compared to just flipping, the A and H to a Sahara as a HA and flip it to a AH, and it's the pronunciation using the same letters is completely different from Sahara to Sarah. And that being the point, it seemed to be like the thing about the, the 8 being the H and the 1 being the A, and a total of like 9, the I-9 thing. And what that is, so, the I on the backside identified as a deity above, on top of the pyramid, or, the I-E-Y-E being 35, or what Austin is to the, the human capital factor of what symbolic representation it is in color code. It seems to be the deal right now of like Jude and Sarah and Judah, because all the information that I've ever really known, I'm just like looking at it, is some reference to, everything I've ever known, that the tribe of Judah has always been about the musicians. And now I'm saying it as referring to, the tribe of Levi and the Levites. And the only thing that I'm thinking about really of Levi is like Levi 501 Blues and what the button-up jeans are, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, let me think about, I think it's what buttons like 92, Pentagon, and Drummer. Let me think about that. What, 20, 40, 61, 63. Yeah, it's 92, okay? 501 button-up. And like the EA test, it seems to be like the Ford Explorer Sport Track. And the EA, being the deal about the, the 5-star, like my first impression of Australia, being the thing about 5-star and what the Lone Star State is to, like, San Jacinto Monument or memorial in the way of like not making the grade beyond, internet protocol of local area networks, or what that is to surface to air, or J. Edgar Hoover, the amphibious thing about it, or even representative, really something beyond, business and corporate law that way, going through the circuit, and being the amphibious thing about, principles of even, the Mount Olives, after the resurrection and going to Mount Olives and Lord Jesus Christ ascending thing about it, or, the second coming being representative of the exact opposite, and meeting in the sky, almost amphibious likewise in that way. Or, really even the book cover, of Orion performance monitoring of the balloons being like the barometric altimeter of condensating residuals, it seems to be, so much yet still of liquidal equity of international financial management and globalization. It seems to be like really the deal about the tribe of Judah and Judea. Judea and Judah seem to be like the deal about, ultimately now, the deal about Sarah, or even the Chuck Woolery deal about the love connection, and the two and the two, the flip thing of like the thing about the sprite, or Sarah, with the HA being the deal about pronunciation, and the AH being Sarah the way it's spelled, and when it's reversed, it's kind of like it's pronounced, and it's not pronounced the same. But the thing of it is that in that way, it being flipped, it's like a song, like a living color, the cult of personality. The one and tell you 1 and 1 is 3 thing. It seems to be the intersecting axis of Audi that way, of like Judah, Judea, and Jude, and the Beatles song about the Hey Jude, and the HA of the deal about Sarah, Hey Jude, it's kind of like and the thing about Judea and Judah and Jude. And it seems to be the EA test of like, the EA Sports and what that is to the 501 Blues, 5 being the E and, 1 being the A and 501 being like the deal about the 0 and the O, 0 being 64, or, Zion, the 1,000 Years of Peace thing, or HCTP, or the PTIS on the backside of the $1 bill, or, the 0 being, and equating to the operator Alphameric's 108 and Chevrolet and Bicentennial and it goes on about some separation between church and state that way, or what Chevrolet Silverado is to the area code of Los Angeles or Galveston County, or Chevrolet Silverado being 213, or telepathic brainwaves, or ultimately getting to the thing about U151 and mental tough with the minus God and a Holy Spirit service in Jesus Christ, and it goes on about it. But the thing with this is that the thing it seems to be like really ultimately getting to is that the power squared, or the syllable seems to be like the deal about Sarah and Abraham, and how Abraham being like the thing about the 2 syllables being 22 and 22, and what that is to a cartoon, a car being 22 and tune being like a 64. What is that? 30, 50, 64. I mean, it's kind of like the cartoon in relation to maybe the eccentric type of like a ratio of like what 64 and 36, predominantly the 2 of the alphanumerics equating to 181 Houston, Texas electronic power and selective service and alphanumerics USA and attenuation USA, and ultimately the attenuation with the UA taken out of the word attenuation being attention, and the salute, the absolute salute thing about even a power square factor of just the salute using just one hand, and what it is to the diagonal in that way. And it seems to be like Univision and the Houston Post that way of like what legal media is like of Univision, what was then, and the Houston Post, it's like the diagonal deal about the absolute salute of the word attenuation and what signal processing is beyond what measuring cycles per second in oscillation would only mean of spectrum and bandwidth. Normally, my thought of a limitation of the 13-band graphic equalizer, or 13 itself in that way, and the 13 stars and what the 13 stars above the eagle on the backside, and all the alphanumerics of 99 and telepathic that way, and being 13 spelled out. Right? Well, anyway, so like I said, considerably thinking about that, but anyway, it seems to be like the deal about Jude and Judea and Sarah and the Ford Explorer Sport Track, and the deal about the Explorer being like a search engine, and all the alphanumerics of 24 being the RF of redundant frequency, or the HOA, Homeowners Association, or GMAC of General Motors Acceptance Corporation, and the promissory notes about that, and the IEEE and the International Electronic Engineering Network, all being 24, and what the deal is between the ERISA statute, the ERISA, and the IRA, and the difference of the SE, and language being C being SE being like yes, likewise in addition vision that way. Yeah, so it seems to be like there's a little bit more to the Apple iPhone SE and some information. It seems to be of I-10 and binary numbers that way of sequencing only 2 numbers in sets of 4, which is normal standard involving computer programming. And how much in language that is, I'm not real sure, but everything I've ever known of like binary numbers is more so on the programming side. Predominantly, language wasn't an issue because it was like all in English, and maybe that is the point. And how true that is with every language might only be exactly that, and maybe naive to that's what it is to every language, and how true it is, I'm not sure. But anyway, so there was like something about that, and what Japanese letters, according to the available information of the Japanese alphabet, according to the information, how true it is, I'm not sure. It all looks like symbolic to me, Japanese. How true any distinguishable difference, if there's any at all, of Japanese alphabet, it looking like symbolic representation involving the different by design thing about star furniture, yet the E being different by design in practical application of like the structure itself, a formula of computation of quantum using that different by design E, and the structure of it in quantum beyond calculus is the thing. Truthfully, that seemed to be the deal about the alphanumerics of, I think that's 107, as compared to the Pentagon being 92 in calculus, quantum being 107 in military. That way, I mean, if the naivety of not distinguishing the difference between the Pentagon would be only administrative as compared to military, which would be if it's the deal about annotation and enforcement, or maybe an empowered principle, a combination of what Technicolor might only mean in the form of like the history of a television screen, or integration in the way of transparency that way. Something I kind of like been thinking about, and what that is to annotation, or that deal about the alphanumerics of 94 or 56 is 10, like seemed to be the big deal about the um, Roe v. Wade. And the thing of it is that the thing of, most information predominantly about Roe v. Wade was about an abortion. Yet the alphanumerics of 94 and annotated, or even abortion. And the thing of it is kind of like Brazoria Country. Okay, like the difference between the R between county and country is the R. Okay, and Brazoria County or Brazoria Country, by comparison to alphanumerics of 206 being Brazoria Country, and the biblical reference of like spirit of adoption. I mean, it's like that symbolic representation, and virtually everything that I've like, through a process of elimination. I mean, how could it really not be at this point of like a geographic attachment of spirit of adoption being the symbolic representation? Likewise, even the fallopian tube, or the YouTube thing about what fertility would only suggest as a projected estimate option in the future, or something about some infrastructure deal about uh, relationship, and what the deal is with infra and other factors of yeah. Anyway, so like there's a deal about the structure and what that is to um, perception in a way what access only would maybe only dictate, maybe as vision or sound, maybe the only two factors distinguishable between maybe what night vision as compared to like a remote black dot, or like the pearl. It's like the drummer being 92, the alphanumerics of 92, and what that is to like calculus, or going beyond what seems to be how true it is of the absolute values of like algebra going through, and having the knowledge of like my memory like really not using the algorithm in algebra, but it's ultimately got to asking myself like even the question of infinity: is she born with it? My last name being Pretty, P-R-I-D-D-Y, it is a map thing. Pretty Texas, P-R-I-D-D-Y, it's like a map thing, and really it's like something really I kind of on and off throughout my life, kind of going, you got to be kidding me. It's like, really, where did my last name come from for real? So anyway, it's kind of like throughout, my life, it's kind of like really been something about that. But anyway, in any case, not necessarily a gender factor or a preference, or it's just something that just like really happened, okay? But anyway, yeah, so the thing with this is that really, as far as like geographic go, I mean, it's like the automatic deal about a map, and what a family name is to even a black dot on a map, or maybe not on a map at all, which seems to be the deal about amphibious, and what that is in my thought of like beyond a residential or a neighborhood, of like a commercial venue of living quarters. I mean, I've heard it referred to that as compared to just a commercial building that might only suggest maybe a storage area network, not necessarily living at all, or a place of business that would maybe represent activity in a way, and only a fixture in real estate would define the meaning if the word is even real estate at all. I mean, if real estate only suggests a ranking in military, or maybe something other than administrative, as far as the Pentagon goes, as far as executive levels, I'm not sure if executive levels in any kind of way rank themselves with an E, like, military does with like, and I don't even like using the word soldiers sometimes based upon maybe, just using some terminology. It almost seems almost ridiculously like there's an accusation of like a breach of national security, just even sometimes even saying the word soldier. It's kind of like, you got to be kidding me. Yeah, as compared to military, or or what the separation between church and state might only mean that way. Or some transparency that would like excuse themselves of participation, or like you got to be kidding me, or what intellectual claim is of like having fair use as an easement in the form of human capital, or maybe the naivety of like not knowing the difference, or something like spiritual gift of telepathic communication of some idea of what seems to be like right now of light scribe, or beyond biometric, in a way of light scribe, or invisible programming that way, and certain factors of like a copy and process using either an orange cambium drum or a silver selenium drum. The word being drum being 56 seems to be the deal about them. Even a 55-gallon drum You know, like M is in is like 55, okay, or heaven or sky, you know, and I'm going to kind of limit it, like, I'm really not going to limit it, but that's really all I'm going to say about it, like, right now. But the thing with this, it seemed to be like, you know, even a font size, you know, like the shows about 99 of, like, Robin Williams, Mork from Mork and Mindy and Pam Dopper and, you know, Robin Williams, and the deal about Boulder, it's like font size, you know, Boulder, Colorado was the thing of, like, shows about 99 and all that stuff about what would give the impression even like U.S. robotics or a thermocouple semiconductor in anatomy, you know, for real, in the way of like even a principle of like representing one, yet of two likewise. And I don't know if I'd use retrospect, but like representing two of one, and then like one of two. It's kind of like, you know, being ambidextrous of like a quadrant of anatomy of like even a drummer, you know, the arms and legs being like a division, yet a quadrant of, you know, practical application of the body of Christ, you know, in a way of what the equator means of degree level, you know, as compared to what opportunity might even suggest, even in anatomy, I mean, for real. But anyway, the thing with this is that that's really, you know, if it's ultimately getting to the architecture platform, embedding encryption, and the deal about night vision of Abraham Lincoln, and the pronunciation and rearrangement of the letters of Lincoln being the kennel. You've heard it before, the next of kin. And sometimes people might not realize in any kind of way a mascot of like RCA, um, or really what that is to Petro, um, or Petro, or, you know, night vision, a PM, Petro, and Metro. It's amazingly true, isn't it? Yeah. So, I mean, it's almost like a night vision thing, a PM. You know, the AM thing about, you know, my thought of like the pastel green of like world history and province of ambience, like on the 13-band graphic equalizer as compared to the pastel red. Um, Likewise on, you know, the 13-band graphic equalizer. And I speak quite a bit about that. But anyway, I was thinking about the Sarah, and I'm starting to get broad and going everywhere. But anyway, it seemed to be the deal about Sarah. Um, Being, you know, some of the content of like the desert and the Euphrates and Sahara and the Egypt area, involving the secrets of the temple outfitters over in the country, in the way of like the deal about De Beers diamond being a European, a German owned, getting its raw diamonds likewise once again from you know, the Egypt Euphrates area of like even the Sahara Desert area, and the pronunciation of Sarah and Sahara, um, that way. Even Abraham and the deal and the connectivity of all the information, and it seemed to be, you know, so pertinent in the way of how Egypt in the pyramids on the backside of the U.S. dollar, and what the advantage Love 30 is to, you know, the deal about the triangle and the Delta Force that way. But, you know, it's kind of like it's already going on like 32 minutes, and like right at 33 minutes, like right now. And anyway, you know, it's kind of like I was thinking about that because the deal about Jude and Judah and Judea and the EA Sports and the information being provided like Levi, the tribe of Levi, is the only thing about in my mind being, you know, the 501 Blues and EA Sports that way. You know, the deal about the quarter and the New Deal Act of Roosevelt, New Deal Act, and Roosevelt like a pi r squared, alphanumerics of Roosevelt being like, you know, 131, you know, added twice being like squared, you know, r squared of like pi r squared, and 131 twice is like 262, a quarter dollar, that way, or what the 100 club is to, you know, what would be representative, not necessarily eccentric, yet a ratio of, seems to be the only two significant of alphanumerics of 64 and 36, that way being 100, or a centennial, getting to, you know, r squared being like, you know, the deal about the bicentennial. Likewise, in addition, you know, the Israeli and American thing, the Israel in the movie being like a deposition in that way, or available in closed caption for the hearing impaired thing, in a way of what teleprompting would only mean to legal media, as compared to, you know, what maybe even JavaScript might present, as, you know, it's not so prehistoric that it rules out, you know, the thought of you know, adolescence in a way. And if it's the only factor of like the ratifying and codifying is in the sense of adolescence, as compared to in the mayor's office, it would reflect proclamations and declarations, or what legal media and deposition is, you know, beyond a method of banking, of television being live on air, and the way it's spelled and pronounced being live on air, you know, being a deal about, you know, the alphanumerics of 105 are the exact opposite of 501, the 501 button up, 501 Blues thing about, Levi's, and some of the information that's being made available now, and the deal about live on air being 105, and it seems to be the whole entire point of the letter I being used and not used in Christianity, like the Holy Bible in the King James Version Bible. It doesn't always use the I, and spelling, Savior. But I mean, it's like a factor of like the principle of like the backside of the U.S. $1 bill, and there's only one I when normally normal perception would be, well, there should be two, but maybe so, maybe not. Maybe that's the option and intent of the deity represented the eye on top of the pyramid. And the thing about live on air being the alphanumerics of 105 with the I in the spelling of like Savior, and likewise the EYE being the 35 deal about Austin Powers, or what human capital is in investment terminology. Human capital sometimes in investment normally doesn't identify like an endorsement as a registered charity or a certificate of deposit, or whether or not if importing and exporting only presents the issue of immigrations and customs, or a citizenship and birthrights, or what that is in ratifying and codifying only if it's even made it beyond JavaScript. Or what might be considered maybe a memorial in a way of making a grade beyond internet protocol like local area networks, and the deal about the hood ornament, the Lincoln Continental, Abraham Lincoln, and the night vision deal about the vertical rectangle being a symmetrical asymmetrical thing of, in my mind, when a 90 degree is applied to the rectangle being the wide area, high-rise buildings and huge large commercial buildings, sometimes the hotel thing, what might be a representation of even still residential, or maybe intellectual obduration of practical application that way, or what a claim is of in retrospect the exact opposite of like a royalty, yet the availability of having something that way that would really even represent that, whether it's forward, backward, what the deal is about it. But the thing with this is that ultimately it gets to the transparency and what that is to Roe v. Wade, or the alphanumerics of 94, like annotated, or adoption or abortion that way, or transparency. It seems to be the deal of like Hobsing between like Wyatt Earp and the third and fourth generation that the King James Version Bible and Christianity actually suggests. Or what, likewise, in addition to the deal about the third and fourth generations is just simplicity of like 3 and 4 being 34, and ultimately it seems to be like real geographic about the deal about the terabyte being 1,024 gigabytes, and how true that is. I've even made calls actually say, like FM 1128 is like right here, probably about 5/8 of a mile. 5/8 like a star, a Father, the Father, Son, Holy Ghost thing, or the Holy Spirit, and what the option might mean of the seems the difference of alphanumerics, obviously, but that many people might think that the Holy Spirit and the Holy Ghost might represent maybe the same based upon maybe a lack of experience, but maybe so, maybe not. Depends on what it needs to mean and when it really needs to mean as a demanded requirement, whether it's the experience of already knowing and yeah, for real. But anyway, yeah. So like I was thinking about that because I did a lot the transparency in the history of the television screen, what pastel is to Technicolor that way, or the terabyte being 1,024 gigabytes, and FM 1128 it's been identified, like Massey Highway or Manville Highway, but it's FM 1128 nevertheless. But the thing is, the difference between like 1,024 of the terabyte, the 1,024 gigabytes being 1 terabyte, and FM 1128 is a difference of 104. And the deal, it seems to be like the Vantage Love 30 deal about the annuity, electronic, and taxation of 104. And you know what the deal is? I mean, I made a call saying, is it really the terabyte 1,024, or is it like really 1,128? Because the deal about the Israeli bird, the whoopa, how it's pronounced, is whoopo, or something like that. But anyway, and that's the information being provided. It is a blue and purple bird, the bird of Israel. It's blue and purple, yet it's the alphanumerics of 128, blue and purple. It's the alphanumerics being, blue being 40 and purple being 88 is the alphanumerics of 128. Yet it's the bird of Israel, the Star of David, the code blue of the 6-point star of, like the absolute Christianity deal of, the vertical bars being, a horizontal in the way of a 90 degree. in code blue that way of above and below the Star of David, the 6-point star. The alphanumerics of like what 138 being like a telepathic angel, a 6-point star, the alphanumerics that way. Or the Deep Star 6 thing of like night vision, what that is in like nano units. Normally night vision is all about, the two pastel colors of being pastel green and pastel red, measured in nano units. That way, and my thing about the more for more shows about nano that way, and it seems to be the big deal of representation, even between, the Apple iPhone SE being the difference between of the ERISA statute, and the IRA and the SE deal about, I-10 and binary numbers, and the same difference of like a barometric altimeter, like an equator representative of like North America, as compared to, the one and only latitude being the equator at a 90-degree being of longitude, ultimately automatically announced to like the 5-star of like Australia, and what a symmetrical rectangle is to like night vision, Abraham Lincoln, and that syllable of Abraham being 22 and 22, that way of the alphanumerics of 44 of oath and hidden. And escrow, it seemed to be it's all the connectivity like Egypt and the Ten Commandments. And the UL listed the pronunciation of UL being Yule and Yulebrenner, like Pharaoh. And the Blackbird deal about the pagan idolatry. And it seemed to be like ridiculously, even the American Idol is kind of like, you got to be kidding me. It's like the Star of David and the Code Blue deal of the 6-point star of the American Idol, yet of Egypt, like the black thing of like maybe, maybe a misinterpretation of maybe even, what the anatomy means. I mean, in any kind of way other than maybe RPM rated at 800 RPMs of like transportation, being alphanumerics of 200, Lord Jesus Christ, a plenipotentiary, and, bicentennial drummer and all kinds of stuff like in the alphanumerics. And, going into the new millennium, it seems to be the deal about TriStar in the tricentennial into the 300-year celebration of America, right? And my thought of like a living color being like the 1 and 1 makes 3, and it seems to be the deal about the flip of the P being silent in psychology, what RCA psychology, FBI psychology minus RCA is to the alphanumerics of 140 and attenuation, and alphanumerics and parallel text is a Purple Heart and God, and then just add the deal about USA, and it's automatically 41, and 140 and 41 is 181. Use Texas Electronic Power and We International, and the deal about it seems to be the biggest and really the only factors of 64 and 36, being of Chase and Oil being the 36 deal, and what that is to even my thing about ERP and white ERP, and 39 being ERP and exclusionary rule provision that way, even of the 90-degree, ultimately getting to the line and principle of like 180 degrees of a telepathic answer, whether it's a triangle or not. I mean, it's still 180 degrees when that line is really ultimately getting to the 180 degree, which is still, the deal about the symmetrical, asymmetrical that way. Nevertheless, if it's a triangle, a square, or a circle, it's still going to be symmetrical, asymmetrical of 180 degrees. I mean, like anyway. And that's what my thing is about that right there, because whether it's a square, a triangle, or a circle, I mean, it's still going to be, the pi r squared factor applied to it in a way of symmetrical, asymmetrical, and it's going to be 180 degrees. I mean, anyway. Yet practical application normally doesn't even teach pi r squared as squared being representative of a symmetrical, asymmetrical value of its own formulative computation. And it's not even used that way, using a symmetrical, asymmetrical factor of the word and pronunciation of the R representing a radius with the 2 normally placed in an exponential placement. But since the word radius is an automatic deal about approximation using 3.14 of the pi, pi, and that symbolic representation, and I mean, it's like an automatic deal of an approximation of half of it of symmetrical, asymmetrical thing applied that way. So anyway, it's kind of like I was thinking about that because Abraham being the 22 and 22 thing about it, and the alphanumerics of space being 44, and hidden normally, based upon everything I've studied throughout the years involving, real estate and law. Normally escrow is identified normally as an earnest account, and the word hidden seemed to be so significant when I really started looking for it. I actually knew it before I realized what, the insignificance was then. It was like not even, even necessary to even know, but like now it's kind of like when I was reading it, I remembered it, kind of like indirectly, indiscretionately there using the word hidden. being alphanumerics of 44, or what that is through space, or International Space Station, the thing about SSI and supplemental security, or even like, even maybe forbearance in a way of a student loan, representative of a principle of like non-taxable income in a way, what it means on a huge or larger scale between like SSI being supplemental security or the ISS of International Space Station. I mean, the deal about forbearance and student loans is ultimately always involving the availability of grants as a given. Yet sometimes, a guaranteed loan sometimes presents the guarantor and the guarantee. If a grant, doesn't cover it all. And the thing with this is that, a grant can simply and easily always cover it. And that's the point. But yet that information is, it's almost like why a patent is not a copyright. Or, once again, why Bitcoin is not cryptocurrency, or maybe even why the Fifth Amendment is not a nonprofit organization. And the comparison and placement of what normally gives the appearance thereof, or why de facto is not like a litigation, but it's all together, and it seems to give the impression of it being together, and like gives the impression that it belongs together, when in fact, normally, that's the impression normally, whether it's intended or not. I mean, that is normally the impression, a perception of given available information. But in reality, when it's practiced far beyond, what degree level is, only to what only is led to believe is opportunity, or the insignificance, or just accepting and not really knowing, or going beyond a practice, maybe just a one-time experience, or repeatedly, one-time experience, throughout the entire career of, using that fact as an access easement, or, what a human capital is of human civil rights, or a normal daily standard transaction to the bank, normally automatically, now seemingly be the automatic identifying factor. Even, the deal about, whether an endorsement is a registered charity or a certificate of deposit, or a defector seeking amnesty, or an obligation that suggested, whether or not if civil rights and citizenship is enforced on whether it's a known or not known fact, or a defector seeking amnesty. You got to be kidding me. Why an acronym of DBA, normally taught as a paralegal, according to virtually everything I've seen, even at South Texas Law School, which is like, on the northeast corner of like First City National Bank, seems to be a deal of significance right now in the Houston, Texas area. And paralegal schools, and that way, I mean, paralegals are taught that the acronym DBA is doing business as, normally not even associated with like Westlaw, or either it's LexisNexis or NexisLexis. But anyway, it's kind of like the deal about, the deal of, like search engines of legal information, normally, given the impression that international law is a source, not a research based upon, a version, or having to integrate a situational, or conditional factors based upon, what might be required sometimes to explain, cross-referencing, in the way of deviant, not having to achieve and avoiding anything that might require, if there's a thing of tolerance, or the state of grace. That way it seems to be the deal about, sometimes, whether or not if it's a standard practice of fraudulent business practice as a DBA, or the accusation of not even knowing a debate doing business as would even give the impression of a normal daily standard transaction at the bank, that sometimes even a direct deposit in a bank doesn't even sometimes even be identified as put into question whether or not if the history of a mailbox is only a rural route, and has remained as a factor of a checking account. I mean, that way, because, like in switching and routing, like a rural route would suggest to a mailbox, I mean, it's like automatically, the deal about a checking account having a routing number as compared to the account number itself. I mean, this happened to me before, entering the automatic bill pay with an account number and the routing number, but once I entered that information, I mean, I couldn't even access my own information. I couldn't even get them, they themselves, at their own website to actually give me my own information, even though I give the information that suggests like, hey, I know what I'm talking about. I couldn't even, and something was like going on, and it's like being like seriously like overdrafts and insufficient fees. I mean, I didn't even know what was going on for like 3 or 4 months. I'm going like, what are you doing? And I didn't even realize that upon when I started to check, automatic bill pay, that somebody changed my routing number. The bank wouldn't even admit it. I mean, you got to be kidding me. And when I found out, it's kind of like the bank wouldn't accept any responsibility, wouldn't even acknowledge it happening. I mean, it's happened to me several times. And it's kind of like now, like a direct deposit in the bank is almost like questioning whether or not if currency over the categorization of money is whether or not if a DBA is a database administration or network operations, casts in a direction of like having fair use of an acronym of doing business as some accusation of restitution in the form of garnishment. I mean, for freaking real, And in any case, it's kind of like, well, who's degreed or not degreed or non-degreed in the way of, you know, uh, what's the real issue with the equator, and all that stuff. Well, anyway, like I'm already going on 50 minutes right here, but really I was like trying to stay focused on it, and I do it all the time because I mean, there's like such a huge amount of information. It's ridiculously so not funny to me in so many ways, and seems to be the deal now of the equator and the Abraham Lincoln and sometimes even the escrow ultimately getting to the UL listed. Once again, I know I'm jumping from you know subject to subject, topic to topic, and all that, but I mean, everything I'm talking about seems to be like really at where I'm at, and really throughout the years, I'm totally going on my memory of like everything I've studied. I mean, years and years and years and years, more than, probably 20, 25 years, maybe going on 30, really since June of 1992, however long that's been. But, like there comes a point in my studies, I trying to refresh my memory and getting the same information really was not happening. It became so frustrating trying to attempt to get the same information and to read it only to discover, maybe, and discover, hey, it's not the same. And what I was really looking for was like already my perception of like, hey, they knew that would be what I would probably, or anyone really studying it that way, that would be the information that was like really what was going to be like look for it. And when it wasn't there, I was kind of like, oh, it's going like, so I really got to the point. It got really frustrating that way, and I just really quit trying to refresh my memory by trying to get the same and like confirm, my memory and not the question of whether or not if it's the significance or not, or what the deal is of proving, hey, guess you had to be there, and all that stuff about it. So anyway, so that kind of got kind of frustrating that way, but that's where I'm at right now, and really, it's kind of like I was trying to stay focused. I might do it again a little later on because it's already, what time is it right now? It's already like 9:30 p.m. I don't know if that's accurate right now, but anyway, I'm probably going to take a break here in a couple of minutes because I was wanting to really focus on the Sarah and the Ringo Starr thing about the song Hey Jude, and the HA um, being the Hey thing about Sarah and Sahara, and the higher angel deal about the HA being 9, or the deal about ultimately between Jude and Judea, and the Hey Jude is it's like the deal about the EA Sports deal about the Hey Jude and Judea and Judah. I mean, it's like the deal about some other factors of even sprite and practical application of proper English grammatical composition when the P is silent once again, normally followed by an S, or the sprite deal, being reversed, being the SP and sprite and right and side in legal terminology, citing, case presence or what that is in international law as compared to overruling an opinionated decision used based upon case presence in the way of like what cited only means to codes annotated, or some integration of stated grace factors in that way based upon situational, or what overruling opinion means in a chronological order of being more than once, and using something that's been used more than once as a standard of supporting. The word doesn't really always have to be evidence, because that might be the biggest mistake. I don't want to use the word mistake because sometimes evidence might only suggest the thought of criminology. In corporate law, normally litigation doesn't really refer to the word. I don't think I've really truthfully heard it in corporate law as evidence. Evidence normally suggests criminology. Litigation normally suggests whether if arbitration and negotiation would only represent that way of like legal media and deposition instead of the word evidence. Yeah, so criminology kind of more so suggests that, but yet in all, when annotation is involved, I mean, who's going to have the transparency or know the difference, or who's going to really not accept what's going on, or would even be considered what a state of grace only might suggest as a demanding requirement, whether it's a known or not known fact of how it's actually accomplished, or what the deal is about it. But the thing with this is that circuit, when it gets to, ultimately it's a factor, when and where the circuit is, the deal about whether or not, if you're going beyond the thought of like a um, taxation electronics, the deal about itemization alphanumerics of 141, um, going into the expenditures of, like the deal about, the aggregates of experiencing some deal about some military time in that way of what the aggregates normally would even suggest. Normally, it's really not even given as information as far as I've read involving even hedge funds and international monetary funds of whether or not if the M1, M2, and M3 would only represent maybe the deal about Vantage Love 30 in a way of really the taxation code 10, the electronic code 10, and the annuity code 10 being the deal, representative, the TriStar, and it's kind of like goes on beyond the bicentennial to the tricentennial and the TriStar deal about, even the deal about TriStar, I believe it's like, like the newest of like, satellite technology and capability of like the Christianity thing about the TriStar. How true it is about Audi and the intersecting axis, and it seems to be representative of even symbolic representations of, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, or what 3 is alphanumerically being 56, or, I mean, it goes on and on. Ultimately, to the alphanumerics of like 94 and annotated, and adoption, abortion, and what that is to the maritime law as compared to being amphibious, getting into the airborne. It seems to be the deal of like, making a grade beyond local area networks that way of like what's it the what LAN being land. I think it's what 27 or code. Normally codes annotated is the phrase, and normally the law library. As far as international law, for a while I was getting like a Westlaw like for free on my laptop, and it's like really international laws seem to be so like straightforward, not necessarily the need for cross referencing. Um, because sometimes international law is not so integrated of situation. It's like a set standard and doesn't normally deviate yet. Sometimes a factor of what having fair use of normally intellectual would only represent of a non-degreed issue, normally involving like residential and neighborhoods that way. I mean, an entire like categorization of like an entire nation of like residential homes and neighborhoods as compared to the big time stuff about commercial venue of living quarters in the way of like commercial building, like concrete, steel, and glass, as compared to what only an economic factor might present as a degree level of reputable standards of consensual participation, other than maybe what maybe might be a compliment. Even what the thought of having fair use of an access easement of international law seems to be the big deal about the phrase having fair use, or what that is, or is not to human capital based upon degree level, or a grade beyond internet protocol of local area networks being the big deal in my mind. The wide area and the wide world of sports of the rectangle and Abraham Lincoln. I mean, for real, about the the high rise buildings and huge commercial venue um, of living quarter. Uh, yeah, instead of like a residential area. Ultimately, being the deal of 1,000 years of peace of Zion and the separation between church and state that way of an equator and operator of Zion being the alphanumerics of 0 and 64 of an operator, and 108 operator itself, and 0 being 64 operator, 108 Chevrolet and bicentennial, and quite a bit about difference between calculus and quantum between 92 and 107 that way. But anyway, I'm already going on. I mean, like several minutes from an entire hour, and I'm probably going to go ahead and shut it down for a little while anyway. Take a break. I'm really trying to stay focused on the deal about Abraham and Joseph and Sarah, as compared to the Hey Jude and Judah in Judea, and the EA Sports, and what that is to even the presidential reference between the Roosevelt New Deal Act. New Deal being 64, New Deal Act being 88, like California and Mormon, and the deal about even Oldsmobile Delta 88, and the Delta Force that way, the triangle of symbolic representation in major universities of the sororities of Sigma, what Alpha, Delta, Kappa, Phi deal about it, of attenuation and signal processing beyond measuring cycles per second oscillation, getting into waveform of special effects and the big time stuff beyond calculus of quantum. I was thinking about that because the alphanumerics of Houston, Texas has been 181, and we international electronic power that way. So I mean, like the deal about the signal processing in waveform as compared to measuring cycles per second oscillation, and the 13-band graphic equalizer of like frequency and bandwidth that way. Yeah. So anyway, and what oscillation is to attenuation and processing speed. Yeah, and what parameters seem to be representative of parameters that would present maybe the thought of control. Normally, even the limiter, compressor, and expander are normally the three demanded standards of live performance of like amplification that would be the three that would be the automatic demanded standard of signal processing. I mean, it's like the most demanded, most needed of the three. Yeah. So anyway, I'm gonna take a break. It's already going on like 1 hour, 1 minute, and 5 seconds right now. So anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and stop right there, and I'm gonna try and maybe I might do another a little bit later, and try to stay focused on the Sarah and the Hey Jude and the Beatle thing about the Hey Jude and Judea and the love connection Chuck Lorre, 2 and 2 thing, and the flip thing between the P and the S and the S and the P and the Spry thing. And the two syllable of Abraham being 22 and 22, what that is to a cartoon, the car being 22, and the FDIC, and a whole lot about the Japanese 22 alphabetical letters. It all looks symbolic to me. Ultimately, only having the significance of symbolic representation. Ultimately, the backside of the U.S. $1 bill, and yeah, and all that. Hey, the Zildjian thing of like Geneva. My thought of Geneva, Switzerland, the Zildjian symbol that way, being all symbolic, yeah, and being all that good stuff about them. The thought of in my mind of human civil rights and human capital. Some of the information, it seems to be a little bit more than sometimes given on world and national news. Seemingly to be a big deal of investment terminology as a demanding requirement. It seemed to be of the expenditure in the military thing. Of like it seemed to be how directly and indirectly quantum is a factor. Likewise the deal about absolute values beyond calculus that way. And my thing about the commercial infinity is she born with it. My last name being pretty. It's kind of like or is that like the deal about the Statue of Liberty? Is she born with it? What does she really mean? Is she born with it, or is it like the deal about importing and exporting in the way of like even immigration and customs, or citizenship and birthrights, or a degree level of reputable standards or consensual participation, what that is to the equator and all that stuff. Once again, even operated that way, or what only opportunity might only mean to availability, and in a way of whether if ergonomics is a factor, limiting what might be considered only a transition of like what a fixture in real estate means as a television of residential, yet provides some thought of what national security means automatically based upon programming. Yet at the same time, there's the accusation of choice. But really, I mean, is it really an option based upon whose perception what programming means, even the JavaScript? Yeah, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to what prehistoric only suggests to projected estimates, options, and futures that way, like JavaScript would even maybe potentially suggest that way of projected estimates, like JavaScript would be even to the spirit checker. I mean, for real. Yeah. So anyway, it seems to be like the deal about it. So anyway, anyway, it's already going on 1 hour and 4 minutes here. I'm going to go ahead and stop right here. And when I do it again, hopefully I'll do it again and feel like it and stay focused on the Sahara, the Ringo Star deal, and the Remo Black Dot, and the Aquarian, the white dot, the white power dot, as compared to what that is to like a pastel. And it's kind of like, once again, real quick, it seems to be like the deal of Univision having 4 pastels. And you saw I go to the drum shop, okay, on Southwest Freeway at Chimney Rock. Normally even a chimney rock is like a rectangle. Most chimneys, in residential are more so rectangular I mean, for real that way. And the drum shop was predominantly back in the 80s. They're chimney rocking like Highway 59, Southwest Freeway. Southwest only automatically in my mind now for like a long time is an automatic 247-degree thing of an international flooding count. Um, yeah, and really what stationary engineering means to counterbalance the Earth for perfected seasonal changes in coordinates of satellites as compared to maybe what might only be the perception of a compass of magnetic field as compared to maybe what it means in orbit and weightlessness and all that stuff about the difference between polarity and magnetism that way in space and what distance is in relation to that. But anyway, yeah, so anyway, I kind of like think about that because, but likewise, once again, I was going to stay kind of focused on the Sarah and Judah and Ringo Starr deal about the Hey Jude and all that stuff. Anyway, yeah, so there it is. I'm going to go ahead and take a break. I'm kind of getting broad and going too many different directions. So anyway, there it is right there. I'm going to take a break, all right.